When you click on the three dots, it always gives you a drop-down menu, and one of the options there is to report this post to Facebook. When you click on it, it takes you automatically to the next level, and you will see it asks you, for example, are you reporting this because it's a bullying and harassment issue? Are you reporting this because it's hate speech? Are you reporting it because it's nudity, and so on and so forth? So we give you categories so it can be easier for us to filter which channel or queue should be looking at that issue. Because like I said earlier, we have a huge team of experts, and they are experts in different areas, and we need to make sure that the issue is being attended to by the right team and the right expertise. And so anyone can report content. I would urge you, if you take nothing else out of my presentation today, please note that you do not have to scroll through that bad image that you see the next time. Don't just slide up and say, ew, that was disgusting, how can he post that? Please report that piece of content if you feel it is actually, if you're not even sure, is this contravening, is it violating community standards or not, just send it, our teams will review it. What we have a challenge with is there's too few reports. And so for us as Facebook, we would not just be hovering over content to look for faults. We usually prefer that it has to be led by actually an escalation through a report from our users. Would you kindly just go to the next slide? This I've already mentioned, but what I would want to flag here is the three ways in which we actually pick up on content. So number one, I've talked about users, anyone being able to report. Number two, our Facebook operations team may pick up viral content or content that is inflammatory based on certain disciplines, whether they be lawyers, security experts, experts in product and design, or even public policy, comms, and all of these areas. We have identified that we have to complement our strengths with working with others outside of Facebook. And so regularly, you'll find that we will identify academic researchers, people who are already researching on areas that touch on our services. We identify non-profits and civil society organizations, safety organizations. We work with human rights activists and many others who let us know about things that we should be paying attention to. Conversations like this, again, I need to bring that to your attention, are important because they help us to address such concerns. So we make sure that we are comprehensively working in very strong partnership with us outside of Facebook, because we don't want to be the only ones that are determining what is true or not true on our platforms. If you could go to the next slide, please. I will gloss over this slide very quickly. When we receive an escalation, whether it's from a user who has flagged it, like I said, if you click on the three dots next to a post and you report it, it comes to we have a funnel that the community operations team, as we call them, or global operations, will look through. So community reports, like the user reports from yourselves, any appeals by those who are unhappy with the decision that we've taken at Facebook, any proactive detection that we take, for example, from virality trackers and things like that, will help us to decide then what goes to our content reviewers to review, like I said earlier, and we have a team of many content reviewers across the world that do this. And then if an issue is reviewed by the content reviewers and they haven't been able to establish or can't tell quite clearly. So for example, like I mentioned earlier, because of different cultural contexts across the world, because of different local nuances that someone may miss. I'll give you an example of Rwanda. During the genocide, if some of you may recall this or may have heard, there was the use of radio by the propagators of the genocide, who kept saying, let's go and cut down tall trees. When they were saying statements like that, assuming that was happening on Facebook, it wasn't because at the time we didn't even have Facebook, but assuming that was happening on Facebook, when we see phrases like cut down tall trees, and it is a viral thing, it's moving viral, like it's going viral, everyone is saying cut down tall trees, cut down tall trees. It may not be very clear to somebody sitting at Facebook what cutting down tall trees is. They may not even be alarmed. They probably will think, well, I'm not so sure that this is something to be concerned about. But then you who's on the ground probably know better. Like in the case of Rwanda, it was a very clear call for Hutus to attack Tutsis who were seen as tall people and were being referred to as tall trees. And so because the content reviewer looking at that piece of content, if it's been reported by a user, may not know exactly whether this is something that is of concern and should be addressed or not, they will escalate it because they can't tell, should I take action or not take action, escalate it to an expert review team. And the expert review team is now another level of expertise with depth in various areas of expertise that looks at the piece of content and now makes a decision as to, by referring to local teams like ourselves who are closer to the ground on the region, to ask, is there an issue with this statement? And therefore, with the partners that we work with, like I said earlier, it could be NGOs, academicians, and others, we are able to decode some of the content that we are seeing as dangerous, even where it didn't seem so at the first time. And so this is what I meant by having this panel, so that you can see there's a huge team of content reviewers who have very clear understanding of our community standards, and by which they make a decision on removing content or keeping it, leaving it up. Or if they're not too clear about whether it is a clear red line of whether there's a violation, they will then escalate it to an expert team, and the expert team is likely to work with others outside of Facebook, like I said, experts in the area, to help us to decode it. And then now we take the appropriate decision. Next slide. Just gone. I've already explained that, sorry. Yeah. I want to highlight some policy areas because of areas that are of concern. I don't know how I'm doing on time, Lauren, or maybe Solomon, I'm not sure who's tracking it.
So you have 5 more minutes, and I know that during the question and time moderated by Solomon, we'll have opportunity to share some of these things so that we can to
close over. Yeah, I apologize. So I'll try to use my time very quickly. I will mention some policy areas that are of concern and maybe might be of interest to the group listening to us today. Number one is hate speech. We do not allow any form of hate speech. Hate speech is content that allows for either exclusion of certain people, like I said, it could be based on your ethnicity. People say we don't like them, remove them, kill them, or attack them. They should, those kinds of things we don't allow. Things that are trying to target people based on their protected characteristics like gender, your sexuality, your ethnicity, your country of origin, and things like that we don't allow, because they exclude people, they intimidate people, and they really promote wild violence in most instances. If you could go to the next slide. That's I've already explained, so if you go to the next slide as well. Next slide, yeah. The error, yeah, I could just go through this very quickly. So we will allow, for example, a speech. I wanted to just distinguish hate speech is different from, for example, if you're criticizing an institution and saying this government is doing a shoddy job. That is something that is allowed for you to say, because you have the freedom to express yourself or criticize an institution, a public institution especially. So the kind of speech that is critical of institution and practices we allow. Some people also share content, because you might ask yourself, how come I still see people being targeted? Like there's a piece of content that seems like it's targeting an ethnic group, and Facebook did take it down. We allow people to share content that contains hate speech if they're doing so to raise awareness or to discourage, or what's the word? They're not in support of it, so they're actually speaking against it. So, for instance, in the example I gave earlier, if somebody said, let's take out ethnic group X because they're useless, the reason why this country doesn't move forward. That is in itself a bad post and would take it down. However, if somebody now took forward this and said, what a shameful thing for somebody in this day and age to say something like this, we must not allow such conversations to be had. Something like that, if somebody was to caption it as an example in the way I'm giving it, because they are discouraging or trying to raise an awareness on the issue, or say trying to discourage people from having such thoughts, then we allow for such content to be shared. So we usually look for the context when we are determining our decisions on hate speech. Next slide. So the other area that we know that is of concern is misinformation. Next slide, please. And for us, when it comes to combating, especially viral misinformation, we take 3 specific steps. Number 1, we will determine if something is misinforming and may cause real-world harm. So, for example, during this season of COVID, we saw posts coming up saying if you drink bleach, you will get cured from COVID, especially in the initial days. That is a post that is likely to actually get some people to follow through, and they might believe it to be true and continue to take bleach, which might cause them death or get them admitted in a hospital. So content like that we will automatically remove, for it's misinforming people, it is not true. However, there's content that we may identify as misinformation, but it doesn't necessarily cause real-world harm. It is just misinforming people about an issue. And what we do with that is we reduce the distribution of that content, so that when you get onto our platform, it's not the content you see first. You'll see everything else, but then this content is most likely like at the bottom of the queue. Because every day, as we are making decisions of what will be presented in front of you, all of these factors are taken into consideration. If something is misinforming, it will from your view. And lastly, we also inform you in case we discover something is not true. And you'll see, some of you may have experienced where we have indicated that this piece of information may not be true, and we provide something we call related articles. Right below that piece of content, a blue link, and I don't know how many of you have seen it. I would have loved for time to get a view of this from the room. But then we inform you, we tell you, by the way, we have established this is not true, and we give you the source of the correct information about that piece of content that you're seeing. So these are some of the actions that we take when it comes to misinformation. Something else I wanted to mention on misinformation, a lot of people don't report misinformation, even where they're aware that it's actually lies. Please, again, reporting is really important. Secondly, we work very closely with what we call third-party fact checkers, who are external organizations to Facebook that constantly are scouting or scouring through Facebook to make sure that they pick up anything that might actually be misinformation, by making sure that they actually verify the facts on the ground, and then that is how we come back to inform you that this actually has been verified not to be true. So third-party fact-checking organizations are a huge part of our efforts, and we love to continue expanding the network around that as well. Next slide. I think I will skip directly to safety. Awesome. Just go to the next slide. So safety for us is a really key one. I only have like 2 more slides to go and I'm done. And safety, when we're thinking about safety on Facebook, like I said earlier, we allow for people to express themselves on our platform, to give everybody voice, even those vulnerable communities that ordinarily within different cultural contexts or within different political contexts may not necessarily have a voice. We give them voice, but then we want to make sure we're doing so in a safe space. So how do we tackle the issue of safety? This is in 5 ways. Number 1, we make sure that our policies, again, around safety are very clear, to make sure that then we are able to define what is allowable, not allowable in regards to safety, and for all the entire community on our platform. Number 2 is partnerships, which you can see on your screen. For us, we work very closely with safety organizations. We work very closely with different partners to make sure that we do a lot of advocacy and awareness trainings around what safety options there are on our platform. So for example, journalists, we just came from training the other day, a group of journalists from a specific country in this region that was going on election, to tell them about how to stay safe in a country that is very hot and volatile when it comes to media, and making sure that they're aware of how they can still navigate our platform safely. So partnerships help us, and this we did through a partnership with a media agency, for example. So partnerships help us to be able to achieve that. So awareness creation and so on. And if you're that type of organization, please reach out to us and we'll explore whether there's opportunities for us to work together. We also use tools. Tools are really important because the scale at which we work at Facebook, like I said, with 2.5 billion users and the number of items or traffic we see on our platforms every day, it makes it easier for us to empower you as the user with tools that help you to make decisions around blocking people who are maybe attacking you or bullying you, to choose how you want, who you want, for example, to privacy tools, for instance. Who do you want to see your content? Do you want it to just be for you? Do you want it to be seen just by your friends? Do you want it to be seen by the public? And that's a really important thing because many people don't know. We've had cases where someone comes and says, how does this person have my picture? Facebook is leaking my information to them. But when you look at your privacy settings, and that's something else I'd love for you to explore later. If you look at so if you go to your profile, there's about 3 or 4 lines at the top there where your menu is. You click on that, it'll give you the settings as one of the links within that drop-down menu, and you should find, for example, privacy settings. I urge all of you today to make sure that you go and review your privacy settings. Make sure you've specified who you want to see your content, how you want to be discovered on Facebook, that somebody shouldn't just be able to Google you, for example, and find all of the information openly there. So for us, we give you the power through the tools we've enabled for you to be able to self-serve yourself or self-protect you. So we empower you through the tools. Another thing we do is we provide you with resources. In the same drop-down menu, you will see resources at what we call the Safety Center. The Safety Center has all the tools that we have enabled for you to be able to use to keep yourself safe on our platform. So if you're struggling with, you're likely to be hacked, you're worried about being hacked, if you're worried about people seeing your content, if you're worried about your children being exposed onto something that is not good, we have a parent portal within the Safety Center. We have a children's portal within there. And for children, for us at Facebook, we're talking about anyone between the age of 13 and 18. So children below 13 are not allowed on Facebook. So if you have children who are on Facebook below that age, please do the responsible thing and get them off Facebook or any of our platforms. Just make sure that when they're of age, they properly indicate their age, because there's a certain experience of Facebook resources that we specifically only give to children to keep children safe, and we have additional layers of protection for such children because of the fact that we know that they are minors. So we provide resources that can help you as a parent to be able to manage that. you as a journalist, you as somebody who is feeling that you're targeted or you're from a vulnerable group, for example, LGBTQI, all that, the safety resources, additional information you can use even beyond this training to be able to pick that up. And lastly, feedback is always golden. Kindly give us feedback, and hopefully in the sessions when we're discussing later, you'll be able to share with us some of the feedback of what your experience has been so that we can keep on improving our tools. And that is all from me, and I really am grateful for the opportunity. I apologize for running over time, and I hope that you found that session helpful. Thank you so very much.
Great. Thank you very, very much, Mercy. Like literally, we usually have 3-day workshops to just go through our community standards, our policies, how we enforce them, how we run through everything. So it is even a miracle you've been able to compile all of that into such a short presentation. And so happy to hear from Solomon that there's questions coming in. There's a lot of curiosity, around a lot of what you've already mentioned. And yeah, I mean, we're really looking forward to engage with you guys in the Q&A time. It is now my pleasure to invite, firstly, my line manager, but she is an amazing thought leader when it comes to counterterrorism. Please Google her. She has done a lot of, whether it's YouTube, TEDx talks, whether it's podcasts centering around countering violent extremism, thoughts around militia groups and terrorist organizations and how they work, how they think, and a lot of work also with research and academia in terms of what are the thought leadership strategies around counter speech, around working with NGOs to carry out trainings on hate-based organizations, and how we can be able to empower non-state actors and NGOs working in this space. So we'll have now a deep delve into our counterterrorism and dangerous organizations work. It's my pleasure to invite Dr. Erin Saltman, who is the head for Counterterrorism and Dangerous Organizations Policy for Europe, Middle East, and Africa here at Facebook. So, Erin, you can start your screen share, but first introduce yourself, please. I know I haven't done any justice in this.
I don't know. I feel like I should be paying you for PR with that introduction. That's so kind of you, Lawrence. And I just really appreciate being there. I mean, as Lawrence mentioned and as Mercy reiterated, we're sorry we can't be there in person. It's a strange year for everyone. 2020 kind of feels like a do-over year. We definitely see this just as a beginning, a starting point. So we're going to brain drain as much as possible, give you as much information, look forward to the questions, but also see this as a starting point for more future engagements in person. Your questions will also help us see how we can partner up and do more together as it goes. And really thank you, Solomon, as well, and YouLead for bringing this to the table. I did share, for those of you on the chat, as Mercy was speaking, I shared some links. So if you are dialed in through the chat, or if some of the organizers want to share those, I gave you guys links to the community standards that we keep talking about, links to the dangerous organization policies that we're about to talk through, and also links to our transparency reports, because it's one thing for us to say, hey, we remove a bunch of stuff, and you might agree or disagree with what we're removing, but we want to be transparent about it with those numbers, including things like appeals. When people appeal, we do get it wrong sometimes at that sort of scale. And then there is also a link there to the safety portal. So if you can't find the 3 dots or this or that or the other, the safety portal has things like privacy checkups. So everything Mercy was saying, I was trying to look up those URL links as she was talking and sharing those in the chat. So have a look when you can. And with that, I will also give some visuals to go along with this. So just let me know, somebody give a head nod when they can see the screen. I see a head nod from Mercy. Lawrence, we good? Okay. So Lawrence and I are on the same team, and we really, when we say dangerous organizations, when we say counterterrorism, the word terrorism has a lot of political meaning in different parts of the world. It means different things to different people. And usually when I say I'm a counterterrorism expert, one of the first things people ask is whether or not I can speak Arabic. And the first thing I tell them is that the majority of terrorists that I look at don't speak Arabic. There are terrorism from many different walks of life all over the world, and violent extremism takes lots of localized, nuanced forms. So when we say dangerous organizations, it's not just terrorism. You don't have to physically carry out violence to get kicked off Facebook. We also look at things like hate-based organizations that might not be openly violent, but incite violence and use hate speech as core to their values. Or even things like violent non-state armed groups, paramilitary groups that maybe aren't ideologically motivated, but are part of criminal networks or part of other types of violence on the ground. So we are having to look at a lot of different trends all over the world. And that's some of the stuff I want to talk through when we talk about hate-based extremism and terrorism. What does that look like? How can we get rid of some of that content, but also what do we replace it with? And this is where it's really important that I understand we're talking to an audience of people where you in the audience will have expertise that we don't have. And it's about partnerships of seeing where credible voices can push back on hate speech and extremism effectively as well. So we're not here just to dictate to you what we think is right. It's about saying, here's tools and practices that we know work. How do you localize that? How do you push back on hate and extremism in your own communities? So you do not have to take a screenshot of this, and I don't know how big your screen is, so if you don't have good eyesight, as I don't feel the need. This is in the community standards that Mercy mentioned. But I did want to share that, we're not just open in saying we don't allow terrorism or hate-based organizations. We also put forward our own definition. This was a little controversial at first because not even the United Nations has an agreed upon definition of terrorism. But we felt it was important because you might go to some parts of the world and somebody's labeled a terrorist and you realize it's a journalist network or an opposition party. And we really wanted to focus on the content that causes harm and the groups that are engaging in violence. So when we talk about terrorism, it's agnostic to any one religion or ideology. It takes lots of different forms, but we know it's ideologically motivated, and we're looking at groups or individuals that are premeditating violence and targeting groups on that ideology with the intent to make or influence political change in their own ways. So that's how we look at terrorism. And that's off the back of talking to a lot of different researchers and experts from around the world, as well as different bodies, like working with the United Nations on our definition. And for a hate-based organization, we're looking at those groups that are organizing around a symbol, slogan, or name, specifically to incite harm or cause attack, verbally or physically, against protected characteristics of people. So like hate speech, we're not just looking at somebody that's trying to be offensive or sarcastic or even controversial. We don't have a policy against being controversial. We're looking at people that are trying to attack based on nationality, ethnicity, gender, sexuality, or even things like serious disease or disability. And that's really important. And so we look at all of these different factors, and that means that our investigators and our teams are looking at offline signals as well. We're looking at news media articles around attacks, around how people are vulnerable, and around different trends. So this job is also never done because we see these new groups appearing all the time, adversarial shifts take place all the time, and it looks different in every single country. So this is a slide that Mercy shared as well, but I will talk a little bit about, how do we use tooling? I think there's a lot of assumptions when we say machine learning or artificial intelligence. What does that tooling look like? And how do we use human expertise in coordination with that tooling? Because the other misconception that usually happens is that we assume that more technology means less humans are needed. And the actual fact is that the more we turn on buttons and use different algorithms and technology, we need more humans because you are surfacing so much more content, and we need a lot of that nuanced understanding that's going to come from humans that have different language expertise and cultural expertise. So the sort of technology that we use when we say we counter terrorism and hate-based organizations, we can do some different things. One is just basic photo and video matching. So if we see that a group like Al-Shabaab or Boko Haram or Al-Qaeda or Daesh put out a piece of propaganda, we can take that image or video and we can hash it, meaning we turn it into like a digital fingerprint, which is like a fishing net into the sea of content, so that anytime somebody tries to post that video or that image, the machine immediately catches it before it even goes live in some cases. Now, if you are just raw sharing known terrorist content, the machine can make the decision to remove it because you haven't given us any context and you are sharing what we know is bad content. But if you share that, we also know that activists, journalists, civil society groups might share clips of what might be bad content, but like Mercy said, they're sharing it to condemn it, they're sharing it to raise awareness, they're sharing it to raise attention against it, and that would not violate. So that's when the machine actually knows to triage it to a human review team. We also do things like detecting recidivist accounts, where if the same account keeps trying to come back online to harass or bully or use hate speech, we want to detect and try to disallow them from recreating accounts. And we do things like language processing, so if we know hate speech manifests in a certain way in a certain country or culture, we want to detect around that. And things like cross-platform collaboration. So if we know you have a bad account on Facebook, we want to see if you have a bad account on Instagram. And in some cases, even on WhatsApp, if we have the numbers to detect it. So what does that look like in terms of numbers? One of the things I did share, just if you are more quantitative and you like looking at the numbers and the data behind things, we remove a lot of content proactively, so before people even flag it to us. So when I talk about organized hate groups or terrorism, just in the last quarter of this year, so in a 3-month period, we removed 4 million plus pieces of organized hate and 9.7 million pieces of terrorist content. Some of that content is old, so it's worth saying that it's not always new groups coming on all the time, but that's a lot, and nearly 99% of that for both we remove ourselves. That's not to say you should not flag content, because the other thing to remember is that you might flag one piece of content to us, and because you flag that to us, we find this new image or piece of propaganda or piece of hate speech. And once we put that in our systems, that one thing you flagged might lead us to find 1,000 other versions of it. And so that amplification effect is really powerful. And again, this has to be partnered with expertise teams. So we have over 350 people that just focus on dangerous organizations 24/7. But we have over 35,000 people on safety and operations teams, some of those groups that Mercy mentioned. So these teams have language expertise, subject matter expertise, and are coming from all around the world. And so, for example, on our team, which is a very core, small policy team, we recognized very quickly that we policy teams, but we needed core expertise just on what violent extremism looks like on the ground outside of some of the obvious groups like Al-Shabaab and Boko Haram. And that's why we recruited Lawrence and we said, you know, let's bring on somebody that has expertise instead of me pretending like I'm just going to naturally overnight become a sub-Sahara Africa expert. We need to hire locally and diversely to understand what those changes in the environment and what violence and extremism looks like on the ground. And so again, this has to have a diverse background. It's also important to have people that have human rights backgrounds, so that we might say, hey, we want to get rid of everything that looks like this. And sometimes it just takes 1 or 2 people in the room that question us and push back on it and say, actually, you're going to over-censor content if you do that. So we don't want to create a policy that just solves for safety if it's at the cost of privacy or at the cost of free speech. And so we're constantly having to grapple between those 3 things. And that makes our jobs really difficult, because I think everyone will know that we might change a policy and remove a bunch of content. Some people will condemn us for removing too much, and other people will condemn us for not taking down enough. So we'll never have that perfect solution, but we have to try to continue to get to a good place where we know that our policies are principled, explainable, and defendable, like Mercy said. And this does not happen alone. So the point of this is to also say this is just a tiny example of some of the non-governmental organizations and civil society groups that we partner with around the world. Because Facebook alone, we are just one platform. We understand we have huge reach and engagement, but it is not just on Facebook. It's online and offline, it's on other platforms. And so we develop partnerships to either fund research on the ground so we understand trends, or develop training modules to develop civil society training, or even sometimes law enforcement and government training. And then we also do programs to facilitate creating content that counters extremism and hate to raise awareness. One of the examples of that is something called the Global Internet Forum to Counter Terrorism. It was founded by YouTube, Twitter, Microsoft, and Facebook in 2017. And this is to recognize, even if we're really good at getting things off of Facebook, it doesn't mean it goes away in the real world. It might manifest and switch platforms to Telegram or YouTube or Twitter or Reddit or somewhere else online. So we need to look across our platforms in a different way to work together. And the way that we do that, an ultimate goal is just to prevent more of this terrorist and violent extremist proliferation on our platforms. And we do that through a series of different work streams. So one is, where can we share technology? So for example, we share photo and video matching technology with about 14 different companies. And that includes companies like LinkedIn or Mega or Just Paste It. You might have heard of some of those, you might not have. Some of these are very small one-person companies, but they have millions of users and realize that Daesh or Al-Qaeda starts using their platform. An example of that would be a group called Just Paste It, and it's run by one lovely man out of Poland, and all of a sudden he was getting tons of Arabic content on because Al-Qaeda started using his platform. So these are not always the big platforms, it's also about us working with smaller platforms. And then some of it's just learning and sharing knowledge. So we do go around the world with GiftCT just to share best practices and invite civil society groups, plus law enforcement and governments and tech companies to the table. And I do have to say that we have not had one of these workshops in Sub-Saharan Africa, so that is a 2021 goal as soon as it is safe to do so. But we have had about 13 different workshops all over the world in places like Indonesia, Australia, Jordan, to diversify how we're thinking of terrorism and violent extremism. I do think Sub-Saharan Africa is a big gap in that work, and so we've all put forward the fact that we need better partnerships on the ground in Sub-Saharan Africa for all the tech companies to have a bigger focus there. Some of that's going to be research, and some of that's also going to be, what do we do in the face of a crisis? So the Kenyan Mall crisis that was live tweeted a few years ago around Al-Shabaab, or the recent Christchurch attack, which is a white supremacy terrorist attack that happened in New Zealand, was live streamed on Facebook. What do we do? Terrorist attack, and they use Twitch, which is owned by Amazon, as a platform to live stream the attack. So these are ways that our companies are trying to work together to prevent the spread in the face of a crisis of content going online. It gets really technical, but again, feel free to ask any questions around these. But it doesn't matter how much we censor content or remove bad content, we need content to counteract the bad content, and that's where counter speech comes into play. And some of the programs we run around that are all in partnerships with NGOs. One example would be the redirect method. If we find partners where we see a group on the ground in a localized setting that helps people leave violent extremist groups, we work with that NGO to create terms lists so that if that person, if we see people in a certain country searching for violent extremist groups or individuals, it will trigger an awareness campaign at the top of their search results for them to connect with the NGO directly. So again, it has to be us seeing where our tools can partner with localized groups on the ground. This is up and running in the US, Australia, Indonesia, Germany. I would love to find some more partnerships if you know of anyone that does disengagement work. Another example is the Resiliency Initiative. How do we just teach around some of the topics Mercy was talking about, of how do we train better around digital literacy for misinformation? How do we train people to develop content that is compelling? And that's part of what this dialogue starts, is how do we build better resiliency in our communication through what they do online? And last, we also work with other people's projects and programs. So if anyone in this room already has a counter-narrative or counter-speech or alternative narrative campaign where you're trying to push back on hate speech and extremism, we will go in and upscale and optimize it with you. Let's give you ad credits. Let's make sure you have a little bit of marketing team support. And that's something we even do with groups like the United Nations and the UNDP. They have a series called Extreme Lives, and they've been running it not just on Facebook, but also YouTube and Instagram, and we support that effort. We don't have to own it to support it. We want to support ongoing initiatives that own by other NGOs and CSOs around the world. So we don't have to put our marker on it, but we do want to help it exist, and we want to make sure it does well online. So really quickly, just some little top tips for you. I'm sorry if you can't read some of my graphic black-white overlay. I'll read it out to you. But some of the things, if you are looking to engage online to push back on hate and extremism, here are some top tips. So the first thing to consider is, what is the form of speech you are putting online? For example, if you add a photo or a video to your content, it will go 60 to 80% further than if it's only text. So when you see advertisers, they always add visual content nowadays, and have for even predating the internet, because it catches your eye. You can get something. And think of how you scroll online and try to mimic what you stop on and understand why you're stopping on that content. The next thing is the tone of speech. So if you're pushing back on hate speech, are you trying to do it through humor and satire? Are you trying to touch on a really serious topic, so you need it to sound serious? Or are you trying to take a more academic tone? That affects your content a lot. And lastly, who's an effective speaker? And I'll be very, very honest. Facebook is not the credible voice in this space. So if me as Facebook tells you not to be a hater, it's not going to work. Same with government. Governments are not usually the credible voice to tell you how to feel, or groups to join, or groups not to join. This is a very civil society oriented issue, and sometimes just peer-to-peer networks are 10 times better at getting voices across than a celebrity or even a big technician. I see Lawrence has the builders in the house, so we'll let him get to that as we go. The other thing that you should be questioning is any campaign you put out online, any content you want to put out there, especially if it's countering extremism, who are you trying to reach? Are you trying to create broad resiliency among young people? So that's a bigger society approach, in which case you want broad catch-all content and you want to reach as many people as possible? Or are you trying to reach somebody that is already embedded in a violent group? Or somebody that's questioning whether or not to join a group? So there's a big difference between preventative content, youth engagement content, versus trying to reach out to somebody that already has a swastika tattoo, or already considers themselves a member of an Islamist extremist group or a white supremacy group. Those are huge differences in audiences. So you need to consider if you're the right person to reach out to them and what resources would be the most catchy to that audience. Again, this is basic advertising tips, and this goes for your personal content or counter-extremism content, but people are more attracted to content when it is conversational, so that it sounds more like a friend. People don't like being lectured at. Also, people have a radar for when something feels inauthentic. So it's better if it just sounds authentic, if it feels like it's relating to real people on the ground. Again, keep it visual, add a video or an image of some sort to catch people's eye. Keep it simple. I will say young people don't have a problem with any of these things more than older NGOs do. Keeping it simple means you might have 100 things you want to say, make it in 100 posts. People do not read long posts these days. Or make the post little and make the post direct people to the longer information. And the other thing is keep it timely. And what I mean by that is you might be countering hate, but other people don't care about countering hate. Or they do, but they don't know what to do about it, and it's really last on their list. Like when you wake up in the morning and you think, I have to go to school, or I have to go to work, and I have to do taxes, and I have to do laundry, and I have to cook dinner, and now you want me to counter hate? Like that's a big thing to ask some people to put on their list of things to do. If you can make it timely and say, well, why does it relate to me today? How does it relate to current news? How does it relate to current trends or something I saw that's happening in my community? Then people are more likely to engage because it means they really should act now. And with that, what is your call to action? So what do you want someone to do? Do you want them to just see it? Or are you actually asking them to do something? Are they signing a petition or joining a group or watching a movie? So all of these are really interesting to think through. So, just a couple more slides. One, just a reminder, I sent out that safety link, but consider staying safe with your activism. Think about the risk that you might put yourself in, or even other groups that you're working with. So just some things to think through around not just your online, but your offline security as well. So if you're posting about an event and you're giving the time, date, and location, bad actors might see that as well. So how much information are you putting out there? And then we want to think through really ultimately with your campaigns, what's your goal? Who are you reaching? What's that form? And how are you going to measure success? And we do have tools that are basically a cheat sheet for measuring success. So if anyone, I mean, I don't know, maybe raise your hand and Solomon could tell me if there's anyone in the room who owns a page or is a manager or an admin of a Facebook page. What have we got for hands in the room? Can anyone see?
We have about 10 hands up. Yeah.
Okay, 10 hands up. So more of you have pages than have read our community standards. I don't mind that, that seems about right. But if you have a page, if you click on this insights button, this is like a methodology cheat sheet. This is actually telling you exactly who you're reaching, how many people men versus women, mobile device versus your laptop. So the other thing to remember, especially in sub-Saharan Africa, but in a lot of parts of the world, especially younger audiences, you're on your mobile. So if you make beautiful content that looks gorgeous on your 14-inch screen, think of how it's going to look on a 2-inch screen, because that's how most people are going to consume your content. And then lastly, I know that we're dealing with you after lunch, so I'm going to wrap up. But if you forgot everything I said because the caffeine has not kicked in, or because this is post-lunch and everyone's in a food coma, here are 2 of the websites that are very helpful just to see more. Anything I mentioned is open public access. There's a really good social good page to give you tips on how to use ads, insights, how to use all those tools that I might have mentioned. But also the counter speech page has a lot of resources and examples of programs where you can outreach around that. So I think I will stop there, and hopefully we have some time for some questions.
Thank you very much, Erin. Really, really appreciate it. And I know there's burning questions out there, and also it's after lunch, so we appreciate you staying with us this much. And I think without just much further ado, I'll hand over to Solomon just to mention a quick follow-up from what Erin said. That last website, counterspeech.fb.com, we're actually in the next 2 weeks or so, we will have revised it with a lot of the content of the work that we've been doing this past year. So look out for that now. Of course, it has all the content, but in the next 2 to 3 weeks, we will have so much more new content about work that we've done this year. So Solomon, over to you, please. Thank you so much.
Hey, Lawrence. Thank you very much. Let's give the team a round of applause. Listen, guys, I think that you just made my afternoon, brighter today. Listening in from, what they presented on how Facebook works. I have a couple of questions that have been going through my mind. One of which Lawrence knows very well. So the YouLead Summit page was blocked on Facebook. And it has really been a painful experience for the team here because we've not been able to stream live. And they told us to go to the community page. And we did an analysis. We tried to appeal. We tried everything we could. And we lost out on the Facebook audience. So sometimes, going back to your presentations, Erina and Marcy, I mean, you talked to us about the criteria that you're using to, be able to identify violent extremism, including your experts, including the machines, including, the NGOs. Somehow, I don't know if it's not like 100% because, for example, why was the YouLead Summit page closed, And then I'm happy that we're putting faces on Facebook because sometimes Facebook is faceless. Even when we try to write or when you try to appeal to them, I don't know, you don't know what to do. And I know you're busy, you're running through all these so many things, but they've been pages that have been closed and the appeal process, perhaps people don't know about the appeals process and how to perhaps get their pages back on. And so there's all that whole conversation. So I thought that Lawrence, you be asking the team to speak about this, but also I think I'll first of all air my questions out and then our audience here to come out and give their questions as well as the online interactivity. Some questions have been coming through the Q&A session. But I thought that we could also talk about, by extension, there's a phenomena of shrinking political space on Facebook, or space in different countries, and Facebook has been accused of using their community standards to enable governments to muzzle their citizens. We thought that you would speak about this, and I've had people here clapping, so perhaps it has been one of the questions on my mind. I also thought that we could talk a little bit about, in a bit of countering violent extremism, you're closing and publishing pages, censored people, but they also know mechanisms of appeal. I hope that is addressed. Then who protects the users against Facebook's violent extremism? Natural justice is not applied. People are not given a fair opportunity to speak back or to talk about, perhaps to defend themselves. And some people think that you're violently being extreme. Again, these are tough questions that I'm sure that you'll be addressing yourselves to. And of course, we also talked about revenge porn. Can it be considered as an issue of extreme violence? I saw that in one of the issues you look at is sexual content that you also are able to net. And there are so many people across the region who have been suffering because of revenge porn. You know, I mean, it has ended careers, it has broken relationships. Like, it's really been something on the rise within the East African community. I also thought that you could comment a little bit about the fake news. What mechanism has Facebook put in place for verification of posts, and what are the standards of managing fake news from Facebook point of view? And actually, have you, for example, seen how violent extremism online has been able to translate into actual violence, and how do you, how are you in position to combat, you know, this with governments across Africa, the sub-Saharan Africa? So those are just questions from me as Solomon, but I thought that you could write this down, and then I can ask the audience here to come and ask their questions. So if you have a question, you could come over here, stand here, so that the team can see you. Lawrence, Mercy, and Irina can see you. You make your question as brief as you can so that we can have many, and then we can have the online questions coming through. All right. All right, let me ask Franklin, you want to go first? All right, Frank, you can make a quick introduction, and then you put your questions in under a minute.
Thank you.
Do you want us to touch? You asked us like 6 questions. Do you want us to answer those first and then start? Because we've already got you covered quite a lot just in your first question, Solomon. So
all right, Irina, let's do this. Let's have some answers to that, and then we can have you guys, the team here, to ask the questions after. All right, there are quite many questions. I can say Lawrence, Irina, and Mercy here. So yeah, please take a shoot at the questions I asked, then we can come back for a second round. Over to you, Lawrence.
Thank you. Thank you. I think I'll just very quickly just take one, and then Erin and Mercy, I know they're going to take a lot of the other questions. So thank you for that. For the YouLead page, as I mentioned to the YouLead team, and I won't get into details. I mean, first of all, it's very unfortunate that it actually happened during your summit this week. So we regret that inadvertent, event. The organic content policy team is going to be in touch, and I'm glad that you all took, YouLead as an organization took the proper measures to engage with the reporting team. So that is being followed up, and I can assure you that we've also, after you escalated it to us, we'll have responses and input on that. I'll just go to Erin and Mercy to address the other various questions, and then we can come back to other. I'm also keen and sure that as they respond to these questions, many other questions that other people may have could also be addressed. So, Erin, Mercy, do you want to go first with the questions around engaging with government, shrinking political space, and fake news? And then we'll come to Erin on the question around violent extremism, what we actually do when we see violent extremism manifesting itself, and bring offline real world harm. Mercy, you can go first.
Yeah, if you can hear me, that's good. Thank you so much for those questions, Solomon. I think they're really spot on. They're difficult for sure, but we have encountered questions like this, obviously, in our course of work, but very grateful to hear that. And I think when I had people clap, I was a little concerned, because I said to myself, if there is a perception that we are enabling governments to muzzle their citizens, I would love to correct that really quickly right now. When I was sharing about the community standards, I think one of the things that I made really clear, and I'm happy to reiterate, is the fact that our community standards are global standards that apply similarly across all of our users on our platforms. Why that is important to note is because our users vary in terms of stakeholders. They're not necessarily just individuals or citizens, ordinary citizens. It will also include stakeholders like governments. Governments have pages online. You probably are familiar with ministry pages, agencies of governments who have pages online, and so on and so forth. So they too are our community of users. So when you apply the community standards, they apply the same to all. We don't give an advantage when it comes to the treatment of users on our platform, which includes, like I said, all of the users, regardless of whether you're government, civil society, media, or ordinary citizens. We don't regard them differently. We treat all our accounts similarly. So that's to start with. Number 2, when it comes to governments, and Erin will touch on even more context around this, because her area actually also involves working closely with government, is that we collaborate with government when issues are especially really dicey. So, for example, content touching on, for example, exploitation of children, is content that we do not take lightly. If we see posts that are trying to imply maybe sexual abuse of children, we will not only take down that content because it contravenes or violates our community standards, but we will go a step further to make sure that through the networks that we've established with law enforcement, that we give them that information for them to be able to action. In other instances, it will be cases where government has approached us because they're investigating a case touching on, for example, terrorism, which Erin will be more than happy to touch on a little bit more. But cases that are really, really sensitive like those, there will definitely need to be collaboration, because at the end of the day, enabling an investigation such as that is key and important to making sure that we have a safe space in the real world as well as online spaces. So I think in the absence of specific examples, or posts or content or pages that have been impacted in this way, it is difficult to say anything further, but I'd be more than happy if you have examples to expound a little more on that. So the point being made here is that we enable all our users similarly when it comes to our community standards and the tools we offer on our platforms, but at the same time, when it comes to dealing with governments directly, it will be on very key and specific issues that we have established with the support and guidance of other experts that require us to be, as a responsible company, to work closely with government on. I think the other question I wanted to understand, or I mean to address, is the question of closing and publishing pages. I think somebody said that they're not clear whether there's an appeal process or not. Because this has come up a couple of times, to clarify really quickly, if this has impacted you or you have had your page closed or removed from Facebook or suspended, number one, those actions are only taken because you have violated our community standards. So for example, if you're sharing content that is pornographic, there's content, like I said, content relating to sexual abuse of children, for example, content like that is likely to get you impacted. So to be very careful and to appraise yourself of what community standards we have in place that allow you to know clearly what is allowable, what is not allowable on our platforms is really important. But then when it comes to any action being taken, whether it's on the whole page or pieces of content that you have posted, we always send you an email, and it's something into your inbox telling you this post has been reported for violating our standards, and we also tell you what action is taken. If the action is, for example, removal, we always will provide you with a link to tell you if you wish to appeal this process, please proceed to do so, and we allow for you to appeal the process. When you appeal the process, it goes back to the team of experts who will look at the issue to determine whether there was inadvertent, what is the word I'd say, removal of that content. Maybe that we need to review with additional context, like I said, maybe in a local context or nuance to understand whether there's something that we missed. But we always will look at appeals. But that is not to say that there will not be mistakes. I think Erin even emphasized on this earlier. Like I said, we operate at scale, a huge scale. And so the chances of there being a mistake are there, and that could happen. And we are not agnostic to that. We are aware that could happen. But please feel free, if you feel that your case has been unfairly handled or the way we handled it wasn't right, to appeal it. And we'll again engage you to give you guidance on what our actions will be. The last thing I think I'd like to pick up is on fake news and what mechanisms we have. Well, I think I discussed earlier in my presentation some of the efforts we put in place to make sure that we address fake news, and I talked about a three-pronged approach we have. But then I want to just also highlight something, because I think fake news, sometimes I probably glossed over this very, very quickly earlier when I was talking about the fact that Facebook does not want to put itself on a high pedestal of being the arbiter of truth, the one that decides what is true, what is not. So when you're putting out content out there and you're saying you're a rock star, who am I as Facebook, if I may use that term, to say you're not a rock star, for example? So whatever pieces of content someone is putting up there, we allow for people to be responsible as a community, to flag if something is an issue, but we want the truth to be determined by those who are interacting with that content. So for us, if the content that we see we establish to be likely to cause real world harm because it's been established that it's misinforming, we will remove it. So anything that's violating our community standards, we remove. Anything that we might find that doesn't necessarily, does not violate our community standards, but still we feel that that content may mislead people, we will reduce its visibility so that you don't see that on your newsfeed when you land onto our platform when you're logging in. And then lastly, we inform you when a piece of content is found not to be true. The mechanism of informing you usually will have involved a third-party fact-checking organization who we work with, and there are many organizations such as that. We have many that also cover our region with the right language expertise in terms of local languages, have the right understanding of community standards, and in addition to that, they also have independent ways that they review content to make sure that they fact check it before they come to say to us that content X is actually not true. We have established that there was no appointment of such a minister in Kenya on the said date, something like that. And so we will actually mark that content as not true, especially if it doesn't have any harm in terms of in the real world. There's no need to remove it, to just simply tell you as a user, so that when you come across that piece of content, no, this is not true, or this is actually not an incident that happened in Kenya, this was actually an incident that happened in Tanzania last year, that kind of thing. So we will inform you of pieces of content that are not true. I think that tackles all the questions that I was meant to answer, but happy to have your guidance if something.
Thanks. Yeah. Erin, you want to jump in? Yeah.
Sure, just a couple points, and I'll try to make it really quick. Yeah, one thing is, we are not omnipotent, despite what people think. I'm sure somebody in Silicon Valley is trying to create that app as we speak, but so far, I can guarantee you it doesn't exist. So just at the scale of content, there's firstly going to be stuff that we just don't know about it. So if nobody flags it, and it exists, and it's going viral, and we aren't seeing it from our investigators, and nobody's flagged it, there's going to be stuff we miss at that scale. Over 1 billion things posted, over 1 billion photos, not just content, posted on Facebook alone every day. So at that scale, we need indicators that either show inherently something bad or our community flags things to us. So flag things, even if at first we say, listen, it doesn't violate, that still means that somebody had to look at it and we're aware of it. And that might be the first thing that starts us thinking about a trend, even if we don't take down that immediate first piece of content, because we maybe don't understand all the context at first. And with violent extremism, there are new types of groups, new branding, new logos, new symbols, new slang terms that are actually hate speech. Those are changing all the time. So we joke, but it's kind of not funny. We always say our job is only ever 1% done. That means we have job security for all the wrong reasons. It's because the adversarial shifts and the bad actors are also changing all the time. We do work a lot with government and law enforcement, including across sub-Saharan Africa. So we have a law enforcement outreach team specific to sub-Saharan Africa, and then my team with Lawrence will usually work with that team to come, and we do give trainings to government and law enforcement as well. That's also to let governments know that they could flag content to us. That does not mean it will come down. So if they have flagging teams, like some governments have internet referral units, that doesn't automatically mean that that content comes down. And even in official government requests for content removal or data, we tell those governments that we will report that transparently. So we also report in our transparency reports the amount of compliance with different governments based on their requests. So it holds them to account. So there's no government that has 100% compliance of, they might flag things and we say, you know what, that's actually not terrorism, or that you're saying that violates, but it really, there's no law that we can see to. In some cases, there are localized laws that prohibit certain things that might not go against our community standards. And if that type of illegal content in a local jurisdiction has to come down, then when it's removed, we make sure that the user gets a notification specific to it being illegal to that country. But then we have lawyers that have to verify that as well. And those are not always the most fun meetings, but literally a bunch of localized lawyers will sit in a room and say, okay, is this actually illegal according to local law for that bit of content that might not break our community standards, but might be illegal in a given local context. Again, we're having to do all these different crazy things. So for that, we also have specific law enforcement outreach communication. So if, for example, to your question about real world harm, if we find something on Facebook that we think is going to cause immediate real world harm or real world threat to life, that could be a credible suicide note that's not just a joke, but we see that it's credible. That could be, let's say we see recruitment for foreign terrorist fighters or even a bomb threat. That is stuff that we do not keep to ourselves. So in those cases where we see real world harm potential, we will communicate with the relevant law enforcement channels. So we do not keep that to ourselves. That is pretty much the only time where we would proactively disclose information and sensitive information, because we cannot have that be something that we keep to ourselves. So that's where we lean into those. But that does not mean that governments can just flag and have everything they flagged removed. Not a single government, including the US or Western Europe or any other countries, have automatic removal rights. And so that's, I think, really important to reiterate. And again, we don't always get it right. So that appeal is really important. And the other thing, I did share the, just to get everyone into reading a lot of data as bedtime reading, but in those community standards enforcement reports, that's how we call our transparency reports, you will see, I think it's really interesting, you'll see the number of appeals. I think for terrorism, for example, last quarter, maybe there were, let's say, 1,000 appeals. And 1,000 appeals could actually lead to 10,000 or 100,000 pieces of content being reinstated. And that's because you could appeal and say, hey, this is satire, this is actually counter speech. And if we say, oh yeah, we have it double re-reviewed and we got it wrong, we don't just reinstate the piece of content we took down for you, we reinstate the content for anyone else that was removed for that piece of content. So you appealing one piece of content could actually get 1,000 more pieces of content reinstated on Facebook, and I think that helps us to get to a much better place. But again, mistakes at this scale will be made, and by having these dialogues with you, in the aftermath, if you in the Q&A, if you're asking us about a specific page or a specific account, we don't know exactly, but now you have Lawrence's email and Mercy's in contact, you can send us a long list with specific URL details and all of that, and we can troubleshoot it. We can work with you. The point of having these dialogues is to give you a human face and a human point of contact so that it's not just, with 2 billion plus users, it allows you to have a more localized contact point for us to troubleshoot some of those things.
And just a very quick addition before we go back to you, Solomon, for more questions to what Erin was mentioning. We really do rely. She did mention a lot of the content that is, for example, removed by already, tooling resources that we have, but we depend a lot on, again, a lot of the reports and the appeals that you're giving us, because they continue to expand our capacity to be able to, bring down and flag out information that is false. Right now in Uganda, for example, for the Ugandans who are there and all the protests that are happening, there are a lot of false images that are being used from Kenya's post-election violence in 2007 and so on. So these are some of the things that we ensure we flag, and content that is not spread and flagged out across our platform. So the more you report, the more you're able to bring this, the more you're helping us to be able to keep not only the online community space safe, but also ensure that the correct, truthful content is constantly on our platform. Back to you, Paul.
Before we go to Solomon, can I just quickly come in with something else I remembered when Erin was speaking? For all of our government interactions and areas where we work with government, and not just that, but all of the enforcement decisions we take in regards to content, we have another resource that we'll share with you, which we call the transparency report. And the transparency report shares all the details around all the different violations we've seen, which ones are legal requests that came from government, which governments reported, and things like that. So we are very transparent in regards to all of our dealings, what decisions we've taken on content, and all of this will be housed within the transparency report. And we'll again share a link to that so that then you can see what that looks like. Yeah.
Thanks, Mercy. Thanks a lot. Also, we have a couple of questions coming through from different people, both online and here. But also, I was kindly requesting if you could just share your slides that you presented with the team so that those that perhaps may find them interesting can use them. All right, let's have some questions coming through. Franklin, you want to go first? You had a question. All right, we just first of all deal with the people here, then we can go with the people online. So you just want to come?
Thank you. I think that the team here appreciates Lawrence, Mercy, and Erin for that. I just wanted to direct this question. I don't know if you can hear me, Mercy and Lawrence and Erin. Great, thank you. I just seen our video. Thank you. I just wanted to bring to your attention two things which probably you could respond to. One is I know Facebook owns WhatsApp. So my question is, while that may not be the topic for today, but there is definitely much more content that is being probably suppressed, that is violent, goes through WhatsApp. So my question is, are you trying also as a company to sort of not to patrol WhatsApp, but sort of also to stop governments from using WhatsApp to tap and suppress opposition or dissenting voices. So are you also working purposefully to make WhatsApp be free so that it's not tapped by police? Every time you speak, though you know it's written, it's encrypted, but we are not sure as we speak whether it's encrypted. So these are some of the things that I wanted if the team can speak to. And then secondly, YouLead, I saw, Erin, you shared a very wonderful screen of partners from the University of Swansea, for example, other universities, other groups which are helping Facebook to research. My appeal to you is that East Africa, YouLead is here. We can work with you to research on certain aspects. Thank you.
Thanks, Frank. Quite a hard one. I'm sure the Facebook may be the owner of WhatsApp. I hope these are the right questions. But yeah, Irina and Mercy and Lawrence, that's a question from Franklin. Another question. You make it quick. Introduce your name, make your question quick, under 1 minute.
My name is James Leonard Magumba, and thank you very much for your presentation. I have a quick question to ask. I understand that there are a lot of content posted in a single minute globally, and I know that you have focused so much on the hate speech and those kind of contents, but I think these terrorists, they are kind of smart a little bit, and nowadays they are just coming up with a technique of recruiting people through posting contents related to job seeking. And I just wanted to know that how fast is this discovery that you discover such contents and help the young people so that they won't be victims and be trapped into such a thing. But another thing is why Facebook can't put a counter-narrative message quickly on a very single message or post which has been posted, just to give precautions for the users to refrain and also be cautious and get over the trap of the terrorists. And finally, why can't Facebook apologize when the Facebook users and hacked immediately and their content has been taken or the conference has been hacked and there is no any message for apology or quickly, just to bring down the pressure of the user and also to take the preventive measures quickly. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot. We just have, I'll take 2 more from here and then we can read some of those from online. You're welcome.
Thank you. My name is Angela Francis. My question is very quick, actually. We know Facebook, you are making us like being responsible, but how responsible are you guys to your users? Let's say you take down my my page, and then you found out later on it wasn't the content reported was true. So how Facebook accountable to their users for those type of yes. I hope you got my questions.
Thanks a lot. Stella, you have a question? All right. Looks like the questions here are done. So I think that what you should do is I'm just going to hand over the mic to Lawrence to answer those 3. Then we'll come back with online questions on our Q&A platform. Lawrence, over to you.
Great. Thank you. Thank you very much, and thanks to Franklin, to James, to Angela for all those questions. I'll just address the first one, and Erin and Mercy are going to come in with the others. On the partnership, of course, Franklin, we are already in partnership with YouLead. Us being part of this is actually us ensuring that we are expanding our portfolio of partners in sub-Saharan Africa and ensuring that we are engaging with actors who are already working on CVE, PCVE across sub-Saharan Africa. And we actually, I'm sure Ivan and Stella may have mentioned that we also gave a $5,000 donation to the MS Center for Training and Development Cooperation, which houses YouLead, just to support this particular forum, because we're very keen to add value on what you are already doing in terms of engaging young people and creating a platform to actually empower young people who are working on various development issues, but specifically also youth peace and security, prevention and countering violent extremism. So we, of course, will continue to actively look at opportunities to continue engaging with you guys and across next year, without even getting into so many details, from a programmatic point of view, which is part of what I'm also going to be leading, we're looking into ways in which we can add value, let's say within our research arm, where we can be able to find out research around militia groups or research around how, violent extremists actually work either online and the linkage of recruitment and the process of radicalization, which probably leads also to offline and on-ground actual harm. So we're happy to, continue engagement beyond this forum, but you can be sure that you have a partner that is interested in ensuring that we amplify the already good work that you're doing on the ground. Marcy and Erin, you want to jump in?
Sure. Maybe I can start and then Mercy can take the really tough ones. No, I think some are specific to my area of expertise, and anything outside of dangerous organizations, Mercy's just going to have a better understanding of it. But to some of those questions, some really good questions. I have no problem talking about WhatsApp. I will say that probably before I came on to work at Facebook, I was an academic and a practitioner. So I did CVE practitioner work. And I think I had a lot of my own conspiracy theories about WhatsApp before joining. So it is end-to-end encrypted, but I was pretty sure, well, once you join, I'm sure I can probably see content. And the fact is that we can't. So even for investigations teams, our internal policy teams, our market teams, we can see metadata on WhatsApp. So we can see things like the profile photo or the group photo and the group name, and we can know the numbers, the phone numbers added to a group, but we cannot have access to content. And when something's end-to-end encrypted, I won't get into the technicalities of how it works, although I'm happy to give a training on it another day. But what it means is when you message back and forth, it's a question of who owns the door and who owns the key. And usually in non-encrypted spaces, we own the door and you guys have keys, and that's how people have messages. In an end-to-end encrypted space, every time you send a message, you and the person you're communicating with are the door and the key. That's the closest I can get to an easy metaphor to explaining end-to-end encryption. But what that means is I can't see content. Now, on WhatsApp, if you are part of a group and there is terrorist or hate or other forms of violating content, you can report the content from within a WhatsApp group. And when you report it, it de-encrypts that section of text to us. So you are actually giving us access, because you have the access we don't have, to a section of the text, not the entire chat thread, but a section of the text. And that's how we have to work in an end-to-end encrypted space. Obviously, there's lots of different apps and platforms that are end-to-end encrypted, but it means that when we work on investigations or law enforcement, we see a lot less. Now, end-to-end means that there's no way that a third party, if I can't see it, a third party can't see your communication on that. I won't get into too many specifics, but that's different if somebody has hacked your device. So if somebody has hacked your phone as a whole, which is not Facebook specific, it means they have access to everything on your phone, including whatever apps you have. So it's not a backdoor to Facebook or WhatsApp, and I have no idea of the personal details, but if somebody has hacked your phone, then they have access to everything on your phone. That's part of what we found out in the Snowden revelations a couple years ago. So it's probably more a device question than a Facebook question. But there's no way, unless somebody's hacked your device, there's no way for somebody to know what your WhatsApp conversations are or WhatsApp chats or anything like that, because I can't even see it working for Facebook. On the questions of terrorists hiding language, it's such a good question. You would probably be shocked at all of the meetings we have just at looking at how violent extremists and terrorists try to hide language. There's an entire policy around emoji usages and language and slogans and slurs and hidden text and switching out numbers for letters. But you probably are seeing some trends that we don't see, because at scale, this is constant. So the other thing is definitely we need more research partners on the ground in East Africa. And we need to see what some of those trends look like that we might not be having. And it means that your experts can talk to our experts on what we're each seeing as trends and try to work it out together. I'll give you an example that's not Africa specific. If you look at white supremacy trends, of which based in London, we deal a lot with that in Europe, sometimes I'll see a photo and it is a person holding a glass of milk with a Hawaiian shirt giving an okay sign. And I am not sure if that is a white power neo-Nazi or a dad at a barbecue, because this sign means white power for the community and milk is a white supremacist sign, and then the Boogaloo movement started wearing Hawaiian shirts. So it gets very strange, like very, very strange conversations that we have to have sometimes about how people have coded language. But anybody that is suspected of violent extremist or hate-based recruitment of any time they get kicked off, there's always going to be stuff we miss though. So we work with law enforcement, we work with experts, and it's about sharing that knowledge when possible. That's the only way we can get to it. And then lastly about counter-speech, why can't we put counter-speech language quickly on all posts? It's because the really good counter-speech is not Facebook telling you not to be an extremist. It's from local community groups. So what we can do is maybe forum can be a starting
any further. And what that has helped us do is to arrest any content that is going viral that might actually also be misinforming or harmful from being forwarded as well. So you find it has reduced significantly in our experience since we launched that feature. The amount of content that can go viral that might be harmful or cause harm, because it can only go forwarded a certain number of times, and usually it is no more than 5 times within a group. So for example, you can't send it more than 5 times to somebody else. It will stop you from sending it any further, so it can't go. So the risk within WhatsApp is the point I'm trying to show, that number one, it's private messaging between yourself, 2 people who know each other, who've saved contacts, so you already know who you're dealing with, and you can actually easily tell them, stop sending me content like that, or I do not agree with that, or whatever. Or if it needed even to be investigated, you already know who it is, so you can say it was Mercy who sent me this content. And question of encryption, it is 100% encrypted. We can't see, just like Erin said, we can't see the content in there. Neither can government see that content, neither can your friend see that content, unless you yourself have been compromised, again, to the point Erin made earlier. That ties very well to the question that was asked by James in regards to why can't Facebook apologize when accounts are hacked. We'll also tell you right now that a lot of times accounts have been hacked because on your side, yourself as a user, you have been compromised or have had, let me say, low security features enabled. So for example, you have simple passwords that can be guessed. Your email has been compromised in that way. You have maybe your birth date or your name as part of your password. You have not enabled strong passwords. So having a strong password is really important, because if your email has been compromised, so you're assuming you have a Gmail address, inbox, like a Gmail account, and that Gmail account has been compromised. So somebody has been able to hack your Gmail, for example. But that Gmail address is the same one you're using on all other social media platforms. So you're using it, for example, to access your Facebook, you're using it to access other things. It's very easy for that person then to hack into anywhere else that you're using this password, this email address. And so for us, we suggest, as part of the safety tools I was talking about, and I would urge you to visit the safety center, and Erin shared the link to that, to make sure that you enable strong passwords to start with. Number 2, always enable 2-factor authentication. So the policy
give you a special thank you from the team here. Thank you very much, Mercy, Irina, and Lawrence, for your time and for answering some of those questions. And perhaps I know where Franklin is coming from when he says that is WhatsApp end-to-end encrypted. There are a couple of questions though online. I don't know if you guys have an extra minute or so, but according to my schedule, I have to be closing this. But maybe if you guys can spare a minute or two, we'll get some of the questions that are in our Q&A section before perhaps you wrap it up. I've been requested to do that. Frank, can you put up the questions? I can't see them when I'm here. I'll try to get them. But yeah, I think I know where Frank is coming from on the issue of whether WhatsApp is end-to-end encrypted. So there's always this thing that we sometimes when we hear like a scramble in the network and you're talking to someone, is someone tapping my phone call, or is, especially for journalists like who I am, you then wonder, am I safe? Am I speaking to people who are also tapping into the conversation? But it's good that we get some sort of comfort and confidence from you to tell us that WhatsApp is end-to-end.
Instagram Help Center, resources, that you can have, to report stuff. So we will follow through with all those resources and ping all your inboxes with that. But thank you to YouLead, the MCTDC, to Amazing Solomon, and all of you for staying this long. Erin and myself really, and Mercy, really appreciate your time.
Thank you. Lawrence Muli, thank you very much. A round of applause to our team. Thank you. And good evening from Arusha.
Thank you very much.
All right, guys. Thank you. Back home, I hope we are off. Thank you guys for everything.